Madam Chair, we're
Yes.
live.
Are we live? Okay. Oh, I was waiting for. Awesome. All right. At 1:03 on Tuesday, April 25th, I am calling to order the third week of the budget hearings. I believe this is our seventh hearing. It is April 25th, 2023. And if we could get a roll call, please, Director Oster.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Counselor Cassett.
Here.
Counselor Lindell. Counselor Rivera.
Here.
Counselor Villarreal.
Present.
Counselor Romero-Worth.
I'm here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Perfect. Are there changes to this agenda from staff?
No changes, Madam Chair.
Okay, terrific. If we could get a motion. Move to approve. Motion and a second to approve this agenda for today. All those in favor, aye. Anybody opposed? That motion passes. Okay, so today we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different budgets to hear. We have until 5 o'clock. Is that correct, Director Oster? Or is it 4 o'clock?
Madam Chair, I think we're scheduled till 4 today.
Okay, all right, so we have 3 hours or so. Okay, so again, as always, I'm gonna try to keep us clipping along and want to give the committee heads up that there is an amendment coming to the budget resolution that will insert the capital budget for the coming fiscal year. And I'm hoping to get that to you all today. And I think it'll be loaded on PrimeGov is the way you'll get it. And then just so you know, I think it's on our agenda for discussion tomorrow. So I just want to give you heads up that that's coming. Okay, so with that, we have the city attorney and her team, and something's going on in the back. Okay. So welcome. I do ask everybody that as you call on your staff, Madam City Attorney, that they introduce themselves, their name and their title. We all are, you are known quantities to us up here on the dais, but the people who are watching and listening through YouTube and through the streaming services may not be familiar with who you are and what your role is. So if you could just, it may be a little redundant, but when you're speaking, just introduce yourself so people can start to be familiar with the breadth of the people and positions that make up city government. So with that, welcome, and I'll let you take it away and structure this as you would like. We will hear each of these budgets separately. So we'll do everything in the city attorney's office, then we'll ask questions, and then we'll go on to the next one. So.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair Romero-Worth. And it is my pleasure to be here to present the city attorney's budget. My name is Erin McSherry. I'm the city attorney. In July, I will have been in this position for 5 years. And I do have several members of my team with me, but thank you, Manager Blair and Director Oster and members of the committee for having us. It is really, as Irene and I were just speaking about how the last time we did this in person was 2019. So the last 3 years, I believe, have all been on Zoom. So it's a pleasure to be here in person with you today. Let's see. So I would like the 3 members of my team to introduce themselves, their roles, and a little bit about how long they've been with the city.
Hi, my name is Marcy Iannarino. I am the manager for the Policy and Legislation Innovation Office. This is the beginning of my 5th week in this position. And I want to thank everybody for helping me learn the ropes. And I'm really looking forward to everything else I have to learn. So yeah.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Councilors. My name is Catherine Garcia Gallegos. I am the IPRA manager, and I've been with the city attorney's office for just over a year.
Good afternoon, Chair Romero and members of the committee.
I'm going to ask you to come closer to the mic. If it's really interesting, if you're not like, apparently a fist away is a good space. If you're not, nobody can hear you on the recordings. It's as though your mouth is moving, but there's no sound. So just
Okay.
make sure you want to be close to the mic. Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry about that. My name is Irene Romero. I'm the administrative manager for the city attorney's office. And I've been with the city for quite some time. I'm not going to say how many years. And I'm almost to the finish line.
Thank you all. We can go to the next slide, I think. So this gives our mission, which does include the administration of the Office of Policy of Innovation, Legislation and Policy Innovation, and the Office of Records Custodians. And the legal program's mission is to advise, defend, and protect the city and enforce its laws in a timely and just manner. We do have 2 vacancies right now, one of which we've hired for. That's an assistant city attorney. She will start in May. And I'll be sending out an announcement about her very soon. And then the other position is the policy analyst position in Marcy's shop. And we have done finalist interviews for that position. And we're starting reference checks to make a final decision for that position. We can go to the next slide. I did want to just show this slide just because it shows kind of a high level picture of how I see our office in 4 programs, which is the legal program, the Office of Records Custodians, the Office of Legislation and Policy Innovation, and then our administrative and legal support team, which Irene leads. She manages 3 paralegals, one of whom is at municipal court and 2 of whom are here in City Hall. The biggest changes since the last budget was that we have now hired the IPRA manager, which is Catherine Garcia Gallegos to my left. And she brings a huge amount of experience from the Department of Public Safety, where she led their IPRA team and their sexual offender registration team. So brought great wealth of experience to our team. We have consolidated all the IPRA services into one place now. So we used to have one records custodian in the police department, one here in City Hall that served the rest of the departments. Now they're working together and they're working with Catherine. And all 3 of them can now use all the same search tools. Before, Cindy was the only one accessing email and Greg was the only one accessing certain police records. Now all 3 of them can access all 3 of those types of records. And I might ask Catherine to say a little bit about this, but the video has become a huge task for her office. I understand that she's reviewing 20 to 30 hours of video a week to produce from that office. So she's the primary one doing that review. And that's lapel cameras and dash cams and that type of thing. And we do have to review them individually because redactions are sometimes required, often required depending on the type of case. And now there are more things that are going to have to be redacted based on the new IPRA amendments that happened this year at the state. Most of which we think were good. There are protections for victims and protections for city employees and that type of thing. The other major change was the addition of the policy analyst to the legislation team. I think you all are familiar with the legislation requests that we've implemented and the policy requests that we've implemented, and we're trying to improve as we move forward with this second filling of that position within the last year, which should happen very soon. Catherine, do you have a few numbers? I mean, sorry to skip back to IPRA, but I had asked Catherine to bring a few numbers about IPRA with her.
Yes, so the IPRA team in the Office of Records Custodians, we receive an average of 150 to 200 new requests for information per week, with the 3 of us completing anywhere between 100 and 150 records requests per week as well. And as Aaron mentioned, that is inclusive of police video for lapels and dash cams that requires anywhere from 20 to 30 hours a week per review, which also includes within the office PST reviews for emails, which may be inclusive of thousands of emails for review or thousands of police reports for review that we are producing per week.
And now I'm going to ask Irene to give a few data points about contract review. The city attorney's office does review all the contracts for the city of Santa Fe. And Irene is our intake for those contracts and helps to log them and track them in terms of whether they've been reviewed and then where are they going after that. And just on that point for our contracts in our budget, the largest contract is $200,000 estimated for Midtown disposition agreement legal services. It just depends on how many we get to, how much of that we'll end up using. We're planning to use the same firm we used to enter the exclusive negotiation agreement initially for the master developer a few years ago. But our staff can bring that to a certain point, but we do just want to use their expertise for kind of the final review and then potentially some of the more complex disposition agreements, which might include the Garson Studios and things like that. We were going to require some ongoing improvements to the properties and services potentially, so it makes it a little more complicated. The firm that we worked with is the firm that was involved in the transfer of the property to the city originally as well, and has a good familiarity with the property. So Irene, how many contracts are you generally reviewing?
So as of July 1st, 2022 to the present, it's 652.
So the volume is high, but Irene has gained quite the expertise in working with those contracts and facilitating that review. As I mentioned earlier, we are, I think, close to filling the policy analyst position again. And Marcy's jumped into her new role managing the legislation and policy program. And Marcy, would you like to give any more updates on that program?
Sure. So I think big picture, one of the things that I'm really working on right now is doing a lot of listening. I think that that's really important, especially when you're kind of helping to shape and to influence policy for the city. So I'm in listening mode right now. But some quick numbers, we've got 7 pieces of legislation winding their way through the committee process currently. We have recently adopted about 8 pieces. And then in our office, we've got 16 resolutions and 8 bills by my count right now that we're working on moving towards the point of introduction. So yeah, I'm just really looking forward to continuing to wrap my head around everything that's going on.
Thank you, Marcy. With regards to the legal program, which is the program that has 2 senior assistant city attorneys and 5 assistant city attorneys. We are going to fill that last position in May. That will bring us back to fully staffed. Some major accomplishments are in the bullets that are it provided, I think, in your packets, but also here. We can go to the next one. This, I guess, is the budget part. These 3 bullets are things that have been in our budget, other than the Midtown amount. But we've had other legal services contracts of about 110 for a while. And the software has been in there for a while as well. It seems like the primary increases are for the risk management oversight amount and the services from other departments in terms of increases to our department budget. We can go to the next slides. So these highlight some of our accomplishments. I would just like to call out a couple of them in particular, but I'm happy to answer other questions about the bullets. Some of the major accomplishments, I think, are that we've completed supervisor training for all supervisors in the city within the last year. Senior Assistant City Attorney Chris Ryan completed that and worked with all of those supervisors on that training. He also advises the HR department and the police department and is lead on risk management oversight. And Senior Assistant City Attorney Marcos Martinez, whose primary clients are the Utilities Department, Finance Department, and the Clerk's Office in relation to elections. He was admitted into the United States Supreme Court this year in order to defend the city against petitions for certiorari at that court, because he had 2 successful outcomes at the 10th Circuit of the Federal Court of Appeals, and was able to uphold those. And the Supreme Court did not grant cert. Granting cert is uncommon, but it's not very often that we get to have someone file petitions in the U.S. Supreme Court. So it was very prestigious. And it took multiple recommendations from other persons who have appeared in the U.S. Supreme Court for that admission. So I think that's something for us all to be proud of. And then in municipal court, our city prosecutor has provided me some stats about our conviction rates for DWI as compared with magistrate court. We have over an 80% DWI conviction rate over the last 3 years. And that's generally, I think, what the city prosecutor has been able to do also prior to Kyle. That's compared with between 30% and 40% in magistrate court. So it's very much a more streamlined process, I think, in the city's courts, because we are all working within the same government in that sense, and we're able to work very closely with the police department for those convictions and to identify the appropriate path for those cases to take. But I'm happy to answer questions about any of the other bullets about the highlights of the last year and then also our goals.
Okay, questions from the committee? Counselor Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not a whole lot of questions, just wondering, you talked about the municipal court and the attorney, and I think you said a paralegal was there as well. Do they get paid out of the court's budget or do they get paid out of your budget?
Chair Romero Worth, Counselor Rivera, they're part of our team.
So they're,
They're in the city attorney's budget. So Kyle Hibner is one of the 7 assistant city attorneys. I think historically that position had at one point been a contract, is my understanding. I think Kyle is at least the 3rd person who's been on staff. Chad Chittum, previous to him, was on our team before he became staff attorney to the municipal court.
right, so they were previously out of contracts, but now they're just part of staff.
That's right. And I think it's been at least 10 years that they've been on staff now, probably. Kyle's been with us about 3 years, I think, or more. And then Chad was with us over 5 years,
Right.
or about 5 years.
And then, I think this is the first budget I've seen, or probably the first one I've seen that doesn't have the 3% and the 1% specifically spelled out for increases for personnel. I know most of your shop probably is not part of the collective bargaining group, so I assume they're getting the same as everyone else.
Chair Romero Worth, Counselor Rivera, there are no unionized employees in the city attorney's office. I didn't review everyone else's bullet, so I'm not sure, but why there was some that had it, but that yes, everyone will get the increases.
I think that was it. And Irene was working with me when I was a fire chief, so that gives you an idea of how long she's been here,
Can you repeat that again?
but. That's all I had, Madam Chair.
Mr. Hopkins, you've stepped up to the podium.
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, yes, the city attorney is receiving the same raises as everyone else is because it applies to non-union employees. It applies to all employees except those under a specific contract. So it would not apply to Ms. McSherry's position, but the rest of the positions in her shop would get that same 3% and 1%. And I think I meant to include that bullet in all those and I just forgot. So.
No, that's okay. So the $390,000 increase from last year, Ms. McSherry, is some of that the increases?
Chair Romero Worth and Counselor Rivera, according to the salary section, the salary increase since last year is some of that increase. And then there's a couple other areas where there's a significant change, and that is in the general liability line as well. From 17,008 to 123.3. And then there's about a 50,000 increase in services to other city departments as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions from the committee? Okay, I think maybe what we should do since okay, we're just gonna keep marching on. All right, it looks like that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And next up, we have the city manager. And again, We'll extend our welcome to the city manager's office and ask that you speak into the mics so that you can be heard out in the hinterlands. And also please introduce yourselves. Some of you are known, some of you are not. Some of you are becoming known. And I'll let you take it whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is John Blair. I am the city manager. I am a proud graduate of Chaparral Elementary School, De Vargas Junior High, and Santa Fe High School. And I'll let my deputy city manager introduce herself.
I don't think that's on. Sorry.
It looked on, sorry. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Leila Arcelana-Maestas, and I am the deputy city manager. I am not a graduate of either of those.
That came up in the interview process, Madam Chair. We don't have a PowerPoint presentation for you today. Our budget by and large is relatively straightforward. We have some increase in our budget this year that relies around a handful of items, one of which is moving in a position, the communications director position, moving that from the city clerk community engagement office into the office of the city manager. So that person, when hired, can report to me. That is part of our broad mission around trying to do a better job of telling the story of the great work that the city of Santa Fe is doing and the employees are doing. Beyond that, we are working to hire an administrative manager to serve the deputy city manager and myself. There was an administrative position in the previous administrations that moved ultimately into the community development office. And so we're trying to recreate that administrative support for me and for the deputy city manager. It's an administrative manager position in part because clearly the person will need to be assisting with administrative work for both of us, both answering calls, greeting guests as they come in, et cetera, but they'll also be serving in a variety of other roles that will assist us in moving large city projects forward, making sure that we have increased accountability around some of the major projects that we're trying to move across the city government to make sure that when we have new initiatives that come through in the budget process, for example, we don't see them get done 3 days before the next budget cycle starts, that we have that sort of work that we're making swift, sort of steady work for the major priorities for the city. Beyond that, there are some minor increases around I think some travel and some contracting. There is money in here that was included for the chart process to continue going forward. What am I missing?
I think that's the big stuff. The Office of Equity and Inclusion is in our budget. Which
So, Madam Chair, it's not too exciting, but we're happy to take any questions that you have for us.
Questions from the committee? Councilor Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have 2 vacancies in your division right now. What 2 positions are those?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, I'm going to defer to Andy Hopkins or for the Director Oster to say.
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, that would be the admin manager and the communications director. This would be for the fiscal year 24. Right now, we don't have any vacancies for the fiscal year 23.
Manager, and what was the other one?
The communications director.
Why are you moving or asking for a move to the administrative manager position from communication director if you have a vacant position?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, we actually don't have any vacancies for fiscal year 23. The vacancies would be for fiscal year 24.
Correct, Mr. Hopkins? Says there's 2 vacancies.
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, I'm going to refer this question to our POL expert, Anita Medina, who was previously introduced to you because she's much more versed in these things than I am.
And will you introduce yourself again, just because
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hopkins' mask is not helping to be clear about who you are. So welcome.
Madam Chair, Counselor, I'm Anita Medina, Principal Budget Analyst for the Budget Department. So there we go, and I can't see. So, thank you. Okay. Okay. So yes, in 23, they only had 2 positions available in this department, and we're going for 2 more positions. We're moving 1 position over. Actually, we're moving 2 positions. 1 is brand new and has been vacant, so they have no vacancies at this moment and will be filled in hopefully in 24.
So the 2 vacancies that are listed in our book are
Are
incorrect.
for 24,
It's not current vacancies.
correct? That is an error.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I would add that the communication director position does currently exist. It's just being moved into the city manager's org.
Correct.
That position's currently vacant. It's in community engagement right now.
It's being listed as a vacancy.
Yes, because it's not filled currently.
So it's currently not filled in community engagement.
You're not switching that communication director position. You're not taking that position and creating the administrative manager position?
No, sir. Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, if I can, so we are taking an existing communications director position that currently exists in community engagement and moving that into my office. At the same time, we are creating a new administrative manager position in my office that will replace a position that was moved out, I believe, 2 to 3 years ago.
All right, so I remember last year when you were talking about hiring the deputy city manager, we had this discussion about the administrative manager and it being probably someone that could serve us all a little bit better, including the counselors, and you made a strong argument against that. So what's changed?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, in full candor, I don't recall that conversation. The conversation I recall having was at the time there was a question, I think my predecessor had discussed potentially hiring a chief of staff position. And the conversation I remember having was that my greatest priority at the time was to hire a deputy city manager, someone that could take on helping to increase the productivity of our internal services, primarily HR, finance, and IT, make sure that we're working together, we're getting things done faster. And I have been interested in hiring an administrative manager throughout that whole time. It just was not as much of a priority as hiring a deputy city manager.
All right, so that person will basically just work for you and the deputy city manager, or is that person going to be available for all of it?
At this point, my assumption was that the person would work for me and the deputy city manager. I know that a few weeks ago, the governing body voted to allow that city councilors could hire their own staff. I know that we're not to that point yet that that's happening. I'd be open to a conversation about what sort of needs counselors have on a day-to-day basis they might need help with. My honest assessment would be that I would like to make sure that this person is able to help me perform better, faster, stronger, and to help the deputy perform better, faster, stronger. And once that's in place, I'm happy to have a conversation about this person providing more assistance to counselors if that's needed at that time.
Can I add to, Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, one of the things that our office is often, it's our responsibility to implement a lot of legislation that passes council. And so there is a lot of administrative aspects to that, and this person would assist with that. At the moment, if there's any part of legislation that requires implementation, I have to seek admin support elsewhere. Finance is a great support to me, so thank you. But at the moment, if I need administrative support, I have to look in other departments. And so this person would kind of centralize that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions from the committee? Councilor Cassett.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you both for being here. So starting with the communications director from community engagement. So we have a communications director under the city manager's office and a communications team that's going to stay in community engagement. Can you please explain to me how this is going to, why are we bifurcating? Why are we not just moving the entire community or communications team over to the city manager's office? I'm a little concerned about that it's not going to be as streamlined being under two bosses, because essentially, you know, the city clerk is one of the two positions that does not report to you. So if you could give me a little bit more information on why that decision was made and how you see this working.
Absolutely. Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett, thank you for the question. It's a function of a couple of things, one of which is our current personnel. The city clerk and the community engagement director has done an extraordinary job of building out a team that is really elevating the day-to-day work of what the city's doing. I think, you know, frankly, it may not be the ideal situation. As my understand it, the previous communications director who was here did report to the community engagement director, but also to the mayor. I also weighed in, you know, it's a collaborative process by and large. And so I think what we're looking at in terms of the communications director position is being in a position that they are in a more traditional sense, like you might see in a governor's office and members of Congress's office, other mayors across New Mexico, be in a position that they're able to be less involved in the sort of communication of, hey, this road's closed. Hey, Fiestas is coming up. Here's where you should park. You know, that sort of communication about the city services that we're providing, you know, what special events are happening at the GCCC. Pardon me, and be more focused on some of the larger initiatives that we're really trying to get across the finish line. Things like getting Midtown done, what we're doing around homeless issues, some of the sort of major public policy issues that we're seeing. So less about the day-to-day restructuring of government and more about the bigger policy issues that the mayor is working on and that I am trying to implement on behalf of what you all have directed me to do. And so I don't know that that's a forever plan. I think we think this is the best way it will work right now with the existing leadership and the team we have now. But we're open to reviewing and looking at how this could work better with future teams.
Okay, thank you. So the team that's currently in community engagement, they'll continue with like working on our social media posts and doing like the weekly wrap. I'm assuming those pieces are going to stay over there.
Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett, yes, that's correct.
And so if you could just give me an idea of what the day-to-day looks like for this communications director, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. So it's a lot of time and energy spent behind the scenes, working with reporters, with media. We'd like to expand the universe of news outlets in which we're currently getting coverage. Right now, we pretty much are a two paper outlet. We get covered by the New Mexican and we get covered by the Santa Fe Reporter. We'd like to be expanding the opportunities for the mayor, but also for all of you around getting on the radio more, getting on TV more. And so a communications director spends a really good amount of time, not just waiting to hear from a reporter that they're writing a story in 2 hours and how do we want to respond. Effective communications director is on the phone all day long, calling reporters back and forth. Hey, I saw this story. Next time I want to make sure you include this. Hey, I don't know if you heard this, but we think the council is going to vote on this next week and we want to make sure you cover it. The job isn't a passive. I draw a real distinction between a public information officer, who I consider to be a passive person. When a reporter calls a public information officer, they call the office that it's about and they call back and say, hey, my office said the answer is 2300 or whatever the answer is. A communications director is an active, strategic, aggressive person who is engaging in a variety of news outlets, also on social media, to ensure that the coverage is fair, that it's not just the city passively waiting to see what has a news outlet decided they want to cover, but trying to shape what the reporters and their editors are covering.
Thank you for that description. And I definitely do appreciate the city taking a more active role in communications and really getting out information both about the day-to-day as well as the larger initiatives. I think there's a lot that happens in the city that our constituency does not hear about. So I am eager to see how this helps us with that goal of getting that information out. Back to your comment about the PIO, though, we do not have a PIO. So at this point, when there is kind of more of that passive communication, as you are referring to it as, will that go to your office or to community engagement?
Madam Chair, Councilor, I'm not sure I understand what the.
So when one of our news outlets is calling and they have a question, when they're driving the story, as opposed to the communications director driving the story, where is that call going to be routed through?
The honest answer is it depends. My expectation will be that the person who's the communications director will be in constant contact with the community engagement director's communication staff, and that there is no daylight between the two. And so if a reporter calls and it's about something related to Midtown, we make sure that gets directed to the right person. If it's a call that's about, hey, I saw Bicentennial's opening in a few weeks, what do I do about that? We direct the person back. And so frankly, that's the case right now. I get calls from reporters, directors get calls from reporters, the communication staff get calls from reporters. And so it's a incumbent upon the leadership team and the people who are getting these calls to make sure they go to the right person. And that's something that we've been working on in the year plus that I've been here, is about increasing the communication that we do with the public, but just as importantly, that we increase the communication with our senior staff so that we don't wake up to discover there's a major news story about fill in the blank and 2 or 3 staffers were interviewed for it and we didn't know anything about it. It's about being strategic in how we respond. And so part of what we're working with our staff now, and the new community communications director will amplify this, is first of all, that senior staff and elected officials understand the rules of the road when a reporter calls. That it's not just, shouldn't feel compelled to have to give an answer right away, but you need to ask, can I have some time? When is your deadline? Like, how do you handle a reporter? And then also, how do you handle that once you hang up? If a reporter calls you, it's not appropriate to put the phone down and wait 4 hours and then let someone know. There's an immediacy of letting the communications director know so that he or she can find out substantively what is it that the person's calling about, what's frankly good or bad about what we've done, and then how can we talk about it. And that takes some time and energy and some coordination for staff to do those sorts of things. And so it will be, I'm even open to the notion that the communications director would sit with the rest of the communications team in the same space. I think that's a valuable thing, to have that sort of line of communication open, but it will be incumbent upon the people, and this will be fundamental to having the right person in that job, that they're not selfish with their information. They share extensively with the people around them, and that we are working collaboratively as a team. And if that's not working, we'll find someone new.
Thank you for that. I do look forward to seeing how this works. I'm sure that we will continue to adjust. I am happy to hear that we are putting more focus on that communication piece. And this might be a question for community engagement tomorrow, but just to put it on your radar as well. In the past, we were able to have district newsletters sent out that I know I really appreciated. I will let the rest of council speak if they did as well. I'm wondering if this is going to open up any more room, maybe in the communications team, that we might be able to re-implement that, because I know that's something that my constituents have asked about. They really appreciated having a bit more of a district focus. I know this is part of us passing legislation to be able to hire staff, but obviously we do not currently have staff in the budget. So it's still an area that I think the council could really use some more support. Hopefully, eventually we will have staff that they'll be able to take that up. But I am wondering if there might be some more space here, and quite frankly, requesting that we find the space. Actually, I'm not wondering, I'm requesting that we find the space for that to occur.
Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett. So I don't want to commit to the community engagement director's budget or her staffing, but I can tell you broadly, that's the goal. The goal is, I mean, this is sort of the precipice of where we are right now in city government, is we're trying to pull away from our commitment to being a 1983 government to being a 2023 government, and putting people in the right places for the needs that our government needs now. So from a staffing standpoint, I think we're all open to that idea of being in a position to do that for you all. I mean, when I came on board, I spoke with the mayor. In my experience, when I worked on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., one of the communications offices for all of the Democrats literally had a closet no bigger than my restroom that had a blue screen behind it and a iPhone on a stand. And any member could walk in. They had 2 or 3 different backgrounds they could drop down, and the member could do a quick 90-second video. Hey, everybody from the city of Santa Fe, I'm here and I'm doing X and Y and Z, and I want to make sure you know. I'd love to figure out a way that we could do that here for you all. That whether the mayor or you all have time and energy, you could walk in. We've got a space set up. You pop your phone in, you shoot a video, and you're able to upload it to your, hey, everybody, I'm going to be at the MRC this weekend for the Keep Santa Fe Beautiful thing. I hope you can join. Like, we're looking for ways that we can expand, in part because we know, and I'm very cognizant right now, I'm talking quickly. I'm sorry, I'm caffeinated, but we know that more and more people consume their news through social media. And so there's opportunities for us to expand the way in which you all and the mayor and the city communicate through those ways as well. So the answer is both and. More is more.
Okay, great. Thank you. I will do my best to be quick coming up. $60,000 for an equity and inclusion study. I will just make a comment. I do not think that we need to study equity and inclusion. I think we just spent however much money we just spent on chart and a year and a half or however long it was. We have a Veterans Advisory Board. We have a Women's Commission. We have a Mayor's Advisory Board on Disability. We have the structure there. I will not be approving the $60,000, or at least I will be voting against it. Obviously, I cannot approve or disapprove on my own. I have some ideas for where I'd rather see that money go. I hear that there are other ideas floating around, but I do plan on bringing an amendment for that one. And then my other question, I like seeing $60,000 for grant writing and training assistance. I think that going after grants is something that we really need to improve. We're leaving money on the table and we should never do that. And then I'd like to hear a bit more about $50,000 for strategic planning services. And then I'm sure my 10 minutes is very much up.
Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett, thank you for those questions. First off, about the Office of Equity and Inclusion. I know that some of my senior staff, including the Deputy City Manager, met with Chairwoman Romero Worth and Councilor Villarreal yesterday, I think, to talk about a way forward. I don't think anybody wants a study. I apologize for that word being put in there. We will flog the person who did that. I joke, but I think part of the conversation that I think the staff had with the two counselors who were two of the co-sponsors of the legislation to create the office was as initiating a first conversation with both our Office of Community Health and Safety, thank you, but which in many ways Julie Sanchez is already doing some of that sort of work. Also sort of looking at to some extent some internal facing portion of this work around our HR practices in particular. Are we hiring a diverse workforce? What are we doing to make a diverse community feel welcome as part of the City of Santa Fe team, et cetera? And so I think I wasn't in the meeting yesterday, but I understand it was productive and there is at least some idea that I don't think we're ready to announce about how to move forward in a way that it's definitely not a study, but it feels like it's productive in the right direction. And I'll let you talk to your counselors about your colleagues about that. The 50,000. So part of the strategic planning idea behind it is a few things. One of which is we've utilized the consulting firm Delta Consulting this last year to help meet with senior staff to begin a process around strategic planning. Are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? What are the shared goals of the administration that the senior staff work for Mayor Weber? And what are we doing to ensure that those are the most important things that we're working on every day and that they don't sit for 3 years and in the last year of the mayor's term, we're scrambling to get things done. Beyond that, there's an opportunity that I think we'd like to do, which is about increasing some leadership training for the staff and the most senior staff. And then at the same time, I think we also want to make sure that we are cultivating the next rung of staff so that if and when the John Blairs and the Regina Wheelers and the Kira Ochoas move on, we have a deep bench of existing city staff who are ready to move up and take on those positions. And then I don't know if you want to add anything about it.
One of the things I would just add about the strategic plan is that with the work we've started this year, we were able to kind of look at our external, but also our internal goals, which were important for me particularly and our office to look at how we want to spend our time here and create a path forward. So that's, looking at diversifying our revenue sources. How do we do that? Making actionable items towards those goals. And so we've been working with our consultants on that. And I think we'll continue that work to figure out what exactly internally we need to do to make this the best city to work in and the best city to live in. And so that's kind of where we are at and where we'd like to go.
Okay, thank you so much. I will just say one thing. It would be wonderful if we have communication with counselors, especially as we're starting to look at those priorities. I know I would really appreciate being part of that conversation. I understand that we're separate, but also we're a weird hybrid. And I will yield the floor because I've run out.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Councilwoman Villarreal.
Madam Chair, thank you all. Excuse my voice. I'm still recovering.
Yeah, and welcome back.
I know. It's nice to be back in
On
person.
cough drop.
Maybe later. Thank you. For the strategic planning piece, I did want to hear a little bit more because I see what you just said is, looking at initiatives from the mayor's office and how the department heads relate to those initiatives, that's one piece. And I think I agree with my colleague that there's other pieces, there's counselor initiatives, and then there's a greater public, like we also serve the public, and the public also should be weighing in terms of like initiatives or things that we should be looking at as we look at the strategy for the city. So I don't want to miss those pieces. That's important. It's not just how the mayor sees us moving forward. It's how we as a council, city council, hear from our constituents and the needs that are happening. So I want department heads to realize that, because they're not hired and fired by the mayor. They also serve the public and they're intimately involved with the daily grind and the things that need to get done. So I just want us to be careful. The strategic planning really is a big picture too of where the city's moving forward. And I hope you all are considering that piece, because that's a big piece to strategic planning for the city.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal. I think one thing I'd highlight as well as part of it is clearly, the external facing policy things that we sort of, I think, talked about. Part of it is in administrations, what you find is you have a limited window of time before you can normalize or standardize good behavior or new programs. So for one example, this year, we're very proud that we've had 9, I think almost 10 successful months of a month-end close every month for our financial process. This is standard government now. So our goal is that by the time this mayor leaves office, it's not a question as to whether they should continue that practice anymore. It is the new normal. It's about modernizing the way in which we hire people, how is all of our paperwork for HR online? Are these things that are just normalized behavior? Even with the grant writing, et cetera. So a lot of it, some of it is definitely the public policy and that sort of, but part of it also is, it's really the professionalizing and the modernizing of government services and trying to figure out what is the best way that we can get the biggest bang for our buck. Even if I may say, with regard to this Munis upgrade, we have spent considerable time and energy over the last year trying to avoid paying for duplicative services that aren't on the Munis platform. And so it is standard now. And I think Manuel Gonzalez, the IT director, spoke to this as well. When I get IT contracts sent to me to sign on behalf of the city, if I haven't seen that the IT office or Manuel Gonzalez has signed off on it, I won't sign it. And so we're standardizing that IT has to be involved in those discussions. Legal, if anyone on city staff is trying to hire an attorney, have they spoken to the city attorney's office to see if this attorney they want is conflicted out for some other reason? Are they too, what is the city because of their expertise? And so it's all these sorts of things that we're trying to normalize and standardize so that we're an actual real adult government and that we're modern and we're working in a very modern way.
So are you seeing the strategic planning then more internal facing so that we are looking at systems, standardizing systems and procedures primarily? Is that the main goal of the strategic planning?
Madam Chair,
It's not
Councilor Vidal, it's not
fuzzy
the
on it.
main goal. There are multiple goals. One is external facing, one is internal facing.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, one of the things that we were looking at when we started this process was how do we take that on? Because that's such a big goal to figure out how to do the different parts. We figured it was best to really look at the internal goals first and then go from there. So that's where we are on that.
Yeah. Madam Chair, Councilor Vidal, I mean, one thing I would add is it's even in the first few meetings we've had with the consulting team and in the work they've done directly with department directors has shown a light on the need for us to make some improvements in terms of how we communicate with senior staff. Do they feel heard? Do they feel like they've had an opportunity to meet with me or with the deputy city manager on a regular basis? Do they feel included in meetings where their subject matter expertise is being included? And so it's really about efficiencies in government and trying to make sure that we're being as efficient and effective as we can be.
Yeah, I think that's an important piece. Because that does affect the public and how we do our business. So I think it would be important for all of us to be part of that. I think we care about the same things. So I agree with Councilwoman Cassett that we should be part of that engagement as well.
Great. Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, we're happy to reach out to Delta and talk to them about how we could facilitate a conversation that doesn't violate the law to let you all be a part of it. Yeah, love that.
Great. The other piece we haven't talked much about that I want to give the opportunity for Deputy Director Archuleta Maestas to talk about risk management, safety. We haven't even talked about that. That's important. I don't know if you want to even introduce staff and that's part of that team. And just to note, that was together when I first got here and it was separated, which a lot of us were confused about that separation. And now it's back together. So
Yeah.
can you explain the structure and tell us how this is working and how this decision was made and if it was from public?
We are going to hear that budget. So do you want to hold that?
Is that separate?
Madam Chair, Counselor Villarreal, that is a later part of this presentation.
Okay.
That being said, I'm happy to speak to it, and I think the deputy is as well.
So I think that's fine if you want to just kind of touch on the counselor's questions, but
Or we
we-
can wait too.
yeah, we are going to hear that budget. We are going to be introduced to the staff that is here and hear more about it, but we do have the city manager's team here to answer at least kind of the thinking behind the changes that have been made.
But maybe we step back. I apologize. I was just assuming it's all together and I'm like, why isn't anyone talking about this yet? So let's wait on that because I just have a couple more questions about the city manager's office. Where is it? Now I lost my place. The position that the admin, so I'm clear, that's brand new because the original admin was moved to the community development department and reclassified.
Counselor Villarreal, we're actually moving that from finance, so it's not a newly created position. It's just getting transferred into our office so that we don't create any new, we did want to support a flat budget, and so that's why they offered to give us that position.
Okay, so there's a admin position that hasn't been filled in finance that's going to be moved to CM's office.
Madam Chair and councilors, it's the funding that's moving. So overall, we're, not adding additional personnel funding. So we're moving funding for a vacant position in finance over to the city manager's office to create this admin manager.
And what was that position for you all in finance?
Madam Chair, let me check with the budget team on which specific position.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, while they look, this is an example of what we've talked about throughout the budget hearings about trying to right-size government. So we're not necessarily interested in just creating new positions. We're trying to move existing positions, in some cases, those that have been vacant for a while or we don't think are likely to be filled or necessary to be filled, to places where we need them. So to answer I think a part of your earlier question that we missed, the previous administrative position was moved into the community development department, I believe 2 to 3 years ago. And that person is now conducting business licensing work.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that move from finance and what that was. So we understand what you all don't need. I don't know if it was something that was not filled for a reason or if staff could elaborate. And we see
Our deputy finance director coming to the podium. If you'll just introduce yourself for those who may not be familiar.
Madam Chair, Council, what we did in the city manager's office is we submitted a less than flat budget in finance. We had substantial savings, including $1 million from our audit contract. So we didn't give them a position, we gave them the funding, right? Through our savings, we were not impacting the general fund by creating a new position in the city manager's office.
So that's when we say savings, that's a one-time amount.
It was recurring. So when we look at the bottom line in the finance budget, we have significant savings. The bulk of that really is, since we used the mid-year budget, we did a bar to implement that audit contract to get our audits caught up and get ourselves online to submit the 23 audit on time. In 24, we don't think we're going to need that significant an amount for the contract. So we went from a $3 million contract to a $2 million contract. The $3 million was part of the operating budget. And if we went from 23 to 24, we would have carried that $3 million into 24. We really feel very strongly we won't need that additional $1 million. And we were comfortable saying, okay, we're reducing finances budget substantially. So we're able to say to the city manager's office, we can create a position. It's not anywhere near $1 million. So that's how we were able to fund the position. We are creating a position, but the funding is coming from the finance department.
And it was from you said audit contract of how many years? I'm just trying to think of longevity of funds. Like right now you're saying it's there. Maybe next year it was there because that was the contract.
So, Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, we did budget $3 million in this year.
Right.
This year was really the concern because we were behind and we were making a heroic effort to get caught up. So the bulk of that funding is going to be spent in one fiscal year. You're correct. It is a 3-year contract at $3 million, but we will not need another $3 million in 24. We will need to amend the contract to increase it slightly for the additional support we may need at the beginning of the fiscal year to wrap up loose ends. You know, we're going to be heading immediately into the 23 audit, but it's not going to be anywhere near what was needed this year.
Thanks for the additional information. I guess I'm thinking longevity. That's still like 3 years. Y'all are gonna there'll be other needs to find funding sources for the admin position. Right? I mean, it's not, I don't know, I guess every position's kind of like that, but
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, it's recurring funding.
okay. Okay. So I see that position, the admin piece. I do think there's a need to support council, and it's not major doing research for us and all that. And that's something we need too, but there's no admin staff for us. 0, 0, 0, 0. Nobody can help us. We're not asking people to call for, make calls for us. What we're needing is like, an example, setting up, attending a training and putting all the details together and paying whatever's needed upfront from our budget. We have nobody to do that. So I'm asking that person help us in that capacity. It's not major. I think all of us can benefit from that, from little touch points of needing admin support. I don't think we're all going to be rushing to that person to be doing this, that, and the other, but I think that there's a need, and we see it when we don't have it available to do someone to be able to help us at all. So do you see that commitment to be able to help us in that capacity?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, I think in the way in which you describe it, yes, in many ways, my team is already doing it. My team does help city councilors make reservations and make flights and do a variety of things. And so I think that's something that we could do. But I think, as we look at whether or not you all do start hiring your own staff, I would think that would transfer back to your own staff once you have your own staff. But in the short term, I think for sure we can help fill those gaps if you all want to go to a training or need help with something. But again, I think we're already doing that.
I hear you, but the potential of us hiring folks is way down the ways. I mean, that's a budget that we don't have right now this year. Hopefully next year that will change. But we're way out for that to occur. So I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, as much as we would love that to happen. So it would just be any kind of support. Cassie helps considerably when we ask, and it's also, she has a lot of things that she's juggling as well. So I just think that there's that need, and if we're willing to make to approve the commitment for this funding, we should also in a way have the benefit of that support too. I hear you about your support. There's also a need on a very minimal level from our side. So I think that would be important if we're approving that amount.
Can I, Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, would it be helpful if we sent, and I don't know if community engagement did this, but if we sent you a form where you could maybe fill out, letting us know what support you need? Just so we can look at that and see how we can
Sure. I feel like we've done that so many
best
times.
provide. Have
Where
you done
we
it? If
done
you've
that?
done it, we're happy to take that information. I've never received it.
I
So
think we've done that, and we can certainly do it again. I think it would be helpful to know the admin side of things.
it would be helpful for us just to have
Okay.
an idea of what exactly you need.
Okay, sounds good. And then I agree with my colleague, the equity inclusion study. I think there's other ways to utilize that money, and we're thinking about potential for that. So stay tuned. And then There's one more question. I'm trying, the comms person, I'm really hoping that the connectivity of that is there, because I think that's where we drop balls and things that are not, that in terms of communications, that we're not getting to that level. So I would ask, I'm interested in a district newsletter. I think there were some positive aspects to that. The other piece is question to you about press releases. When there's something that a counselor is working on or leading, whether it's an activity, meeting, and or legislation, is that comms director then going to be our point person too for press releases?
Madam Chair, Councilors Villarreal, I think in the short term, it could be, again, I think once you all are hiring your own staffers, which again, may not be for a year or two, your staffer would be likely to, you're doing your administrative work, your comms work, your research work, your policy work.
Yeah.
Before I go, something different. Okay. I think that's it gets, the short answer is yes. I think the person can help with that. It also gets complicated in terms of, I've seen it happen in, I worked at the legislature 22 years ago. And I did communications on behalf of the Democratic caucus. And the idea initially was to figure out how to highlight the 4 or 5 big things every day. And then eventually pretty quickly it became, well, we can't leave anybody off. So it became what every single House member was doing every single day, which wasn't effective. And so part of it will be, there has to be some strategy around who is participating, who's not in a press release. Is it on behalf of the mayors, on behalf of just 2 counselors or 4 counselors, or et cetera? I think there's room there for that sort of work to happen. In the case, even this last week in the lawsuit that we filed against the county over the anti-annexation work they're doing, we included quotes from Councilors Lindell and Cassett because they are the 2 that's been negotiating. I think if we get to the point that we're doing the ELUA negotiations as we move forward to the annexation, it might be Councilor Cassett or you or Councilor Michael Garcia who are going to be the counselors there. So I think it's sort of one on and one off, but I want to make sure that there isn't ever an expectation that every press release will include 9 quotes from the mayor and all account. Like that is sort of undoable. But to your point, if it's something that you're leading or another counselor is leading, I think it's fair to have a conversation about helping that person either put something out, or even I could see once you do have staff, the communications director help training all of the staffers to say, here are the basics of a press release, here's what you want to include, et cetera, that sort of stuff. So I think there's a lot of things the communications director can do to help make sure that all counselors feel like they're getting access to communicate with the public in that way.
Yeah, I think that's not balanced right now. And there's certain things that could be highlighted that aren't. Part of it was capacity, part of it's not interest by certain staff members. So I think we need to clarify that and know how the communications director is going to work with all of us and also directors to make sure that they're lifting up the work in the different departments and making sure that information is coordinated, because some departments have their own kind of comms person, and then just making sure that it's a concerted, coordinated effort.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, you're speaking my language. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we're not there yet, and obviously we haven't had a person in that position, so I'm looking forward to having somebody leading that effort.
Great.
I think that's all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? I do have a few questions and a couple of things to clarify. But I would like to hear the 60,000 for grant writing and training assistance. What are you seeing there, and how does that fit in with other grant writers we have in other places in the city?
So Madam Chair, one of the things that I've been in discussion with Director Oster and Cheryl James, who is our grants manager. Oh, yeah, grants manager. We right now in the city don't have the infrastructure to host a lot of grants because not a lot of people have been trained on how to, one, apply for them, but also after application, what are the next steps? So managing those grants. So we wanted to work with, I've been looking for some local entities to be able to help us train more. And we actually just sent a good chunk of staff to grant writing training this last week so that we can get as many grant writers as we can. And then not only writing the grants, but what happens after that. So getting some support from hopefully a local entity to be able to work with us to create that infrastructure, not only in the finance department, but in the other departments as well. So so that we can really get a hold of our diversifying our revenue. So I think that that's kind of what we're looking at.
But it doesn't mean that all grant writing is going to happen in the CM's office.
No.
It's more maybe coordinated, maybe helping people obtain the skills they need, maybe helping with finance to make sure that we're applying with the grant
Yeah.
and requirements.
Exactly. And looking at what we're doing now and how we can make that, how we can improve on what we're doing now. So best practices would be what would be ideal for us.
Madam Chair, we have zero interest in being that involved in the grant process.
Well, it's a huge lift.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, you couldn't do it.
Foresee a
Yeah.
grants team in the city manager's office.
Yeah.
The
I don't
goal is
either.
that, you know, again, oftentimes when things touch multiple departments, it's easiest to have some of the training or some of the funding sit with my department. So in that way, we can cover everybody across the board. So that's why the funding is with us.
Okay. And the money for legislative support services, what did you mean by that?
Madam Chair, the bulk of that money, I believe, if not all of it, is for our lobbyist who serves at the legislature, I believe. I'd look to Director Oster for guidance.
Yes, Madam Chair, that's the city
Ah.
lobbyist.
Okay, I think we need to describe that differently in the future. Because that it's not clear what that is.
Okay.
Let's see, we talked already about strategic planning. I do want to echo my colleagues. I don't think there is any support for an equity and inclusion study. I'm just going to say that publicly. And, but I do think, as has been mentioned, I am working with counselors to reintroduce an equity and inclusion resolution to create an office, as the city manager indicated and the deputy city manager indicated. We have had some preliminary meetings about how to do that. So I think that money will be very important to furthering that work. But I just want to be clear, we're not going to study this idea. On staff for the council, I think that conversation that just took place between Councilwoman Villarreal and the CM and deputy CM, you know, begins to lay the groundwork about why the council also needs support. And I think we did pass an ordinance that gets rid of the roadblocks, I think is what I've called them, for us that have prevented us from being able to hire our own staff. And I think kind of next steps is we need to figure out as counselors, and we'll probably need help figuring out what is it exactly that the counselors want in a staff person. And, you know, what's that job description look like? And is it the same? Or do different counselors want different things? In which case, do we need more than one kind of a job description? And then I think if you look at the county model, they each have a staff person. And some of the work that staff person does for them, I believe, is around this communications piece. So I think what we're going to have to do is figure out what we want. Do we want somebody who does administrative stuff? Do we want somebody who does communication stuff? Do we want somebody who does policy analysis and research? Do we want somebody who does all of those things? So those are the next conversations that have to happen. And then, you know, is this a full-time position, a part-time position? Do we, you know, how do we find the money to do this? Maybe our revenues will surprise us and there'll be money to do this sooner rather than later. Maybe this is something that we're going to have to wait for. So I think there is certainly been a lot of interest in what we're thinking and what we're doing, but that's the way I sort of see next steps is we as counselors have to decide what it is we need to support us in the work that we've done. And I think the conversation that just occurred starts to give an indication of some of the things that counselors are identifying as important to the roles that we fill and the work that we do. So I just wanted to flag those two things. And so with that, if there aren't, Counselor Rivera, one more question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. City Manager Blair, does PD still have their own PIO as well?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, as I understand it, Deputy Chief Valdez does the majority of the press work for the police department.
All right, so
As I understand it, sir, fire does not have an equivalent. When fire has had to do press, it's often either been the community engagement director or myself who's helped. Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, I don't know the answer to the question.
Madam Chair, Counselor, I can look the full name up. What's the employee's first name?
I have seen his name on emails. I think he is still there, but I don't know what role he's playing.
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, I know that when shortly after I started, we had a fire in an encampment. And I know that I was helping the police department or the fire department with press around that, and then definitely around Hermit's Peak. They were asking for assistance in that regard as well.
Been heard from for a while, so just curious, but just like my colleagues, I think when you have so many different people that can give information to the press, trying to wrangle all those people in so we're giving the same message can be difficult.
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, as an analogy, I can tell you when I worked at the Interior Department, the Communications Leadership Secretary held a few times a week, a meeting with the communications people for BLM, the Park Service, Fish and Wildlife, all the various things. And there was a coordinated effort. So all of those communications people were expected to be forthcoming about, we're planning to do a social media post about this on Tuesday, a press event on Thursday, a speech on Friday, et cetera. And so there was able to be coordination done in advance to make sure nobody stepped on each other's toes, but also to ensure that those lines of communication are open. And I know there's been some work done around that with the community engagement office and communication staff around city government. I know the previous communications director was doing some work around that. And so again, it's just about elevating that and making it work better.
Yeah, I've seen those issues be a problem here in the past. So that's just
Yes, sir.
saying. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was last year I took some travel and the city paid for it with a P card, which was really convenient. But this year I was told that the policy had changed and that I had to pay it all upfront and then would get reimbursed. So what about for potentially counselors that maybe can't afford to do that, or city staff that can't afford to put the money up right away?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, I'm going to defer to our finance director to speak about that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, City Manager, Deputy City Manager. Circling back to the question about Mr. Goulet, I don't see anyone on the current organizational listing in fire with that last name. So
It was police.
police, also known in police. As far as the P card policy, the city did make a change right as I was joining the team regarding P cards. And really what that was done, the reason that was done was to address a lot of non-compliance with other city policies. So, the P card is a payment method. It's not a procurement mechanism. So you can't just walk into a store and buy things. You still have to go through a procurement process. With regard to travel, we do have an advance process, and both employees and counselors have the opportunity to request an advance of up to 80% prior to travel. And then we do a reconciliation when you return from travel. And, sometimes the city owes the employee additional funds, and sometimes the employee owes the city back money. We do have a travel advance process that addresses the concern about having to front money, and we would certainly be happy to work with you. I think we are working with you on your upcoming trip to issue a travel advance. The problem with using P cards for travel is that every traveler has to have a P card. If you wanted to use a P card for a hotel, for example, you would have to have the card with you to present. It's also, just exposes the city to a lot of risk, particularly around the procurement process. So at some point, I think we can look at whether or not it makes sense for the city to bring back travel, P cards for travel. But at this point, where we're at in finance, my assessment is that we don't have strong enough internal controls around procurement and the rest of the purchasing process to be able to support travel related purchases on P cards. However, like I said, we do have a travel advance process that addresses the concern about employees having to advance money themselves for work-related travel.
That should be pretty close to after making the purchases on your own credit card. The advancement.
Madam Chair and Councilor Rivera, yes, I think the timing, should be pretty close. That would be the goal.
So it hasn't worked out that way for me. So I just want to make sure that for other employees or for other counselors that decide to travel, that we figure out what we're gonna do. So it's much quicker than it has been for me, I guess.
Sure, Councilor Rivera, I hear that concern, and we definitely want to make the process as speedy as possible. And, I apologize that that hasn't been your experience. We would definitely like to have your feedback about how we can improve. I think the process does work, and it's used on a regular basis by travelers throughout city government, particularly in police and fire. I apologize that your experience hasn't been great. And we'll continue to work on improving.
Yeah. And then the assistant finance director just said something about $1 million of recurring funds that weren't going to be needed by your department anymore, and some of it's going to fund an administrative manager. We've had some small requests or some small amounts that this council or this committee, I think, would like to try and get funded for next fiscal year. So I guess I'll ask you why that funding can't be used for some of those things.
Madam Chair and councilors, so we were looking at building a flat budget overall, and when we were in particular looking at building finances budget and thinking about what kind of contractual support we think we're going to need in fiscal year 2024 for audits, we were working based on our current timeline of completing FY21 and FY22, and then only having FY23 to work on in FY24, which would be the normal cycle. Normally, you're working on one audit and it's lags by one fiscal year. You're completing the FY23 audit and FY24. Now, we're not there yet, but our plan is to get there by December 15th to be on that regular trajectory for audits. So the expectation is that we won't need as much contractual support, particularly in the second half of fiscal year 2024 for this particular purpose for audit support. The funding that Alexis mentioned, that Deputy Director Latero mentioned, was allocated to a number of different purposes throughout the city. This position in the city manager's office is one thing. The majority of this funding went to assist with the salary increases. The 1% and 3% across the board salary increases are partially funded by this allocation. Other funding for those 1% and 3% salary increases came out of one-time initiatives in the HR budget, for example, the recruitment and retention initiatives. So I guess the short answer to your question, circling back to your question, why can't it be used to fund some of the things that have come up during our budget hearings? The reason is because it's already been allocated to other things that are already included in the budget, namely the salary increases. I mean, that the city's personnel budget, 63% of our general fund expenditures are related to personnel. So that's the answer, is because it's already been spent. However, there is an opportunity to propose an amendment if there was a specific area you wanted to take it from.
I got it. I just figured there was some good reason that I couldn't use it. So.
Okay, are we ready to move on? All right. I think that's all we have for you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Council.
Who is going to talk about the city council budget?
Do you want to switch seats?
That would be us, Madam Chair.
Hard to be in two places at once.
We're here for the long run.
Okay, so I think, I don't think there are slides on the, oh, there is a slide on the city council budget right there. Look at that. Okay, I will, Mr. Hopkins, you're back. Are you here to support our deputy city manager?
Madam Chair, I was just offering my services if Layla didn't want to cover it, but if she wants to cover it, I will happily go sit.
All right, we'll let the deputy city manager kick it off and then she'll refer to you as needed. And I think there's not a lot here. It's pretty skimpy. So
The
take it away.
Madam Chair, the biggest difference in your all budget for this year, you see there is an increase in $15,359. That is for benefits and para up increases. So that is the increase in that. Other than that, everything is same as previous years.
Okay, questions from the committee? Councilwoman Villarreal.
Madam Chair, just to clarify, you all don't set our salary. It's set at the state through the Constitution, I believe. And unfortunately, I think that municipalities were the only group that didn't get the increases at the state level. Everyone else did. The state legislators, state officials, county commissioners. I'm curious if county commissioners fall under that. But I just want the public to know that this is not something that we have any control over. It's set by the state. And I think we're the only non-increases. So it stays the same for quote part-time counselors.
Counselor Lindell.
On that point, I think we'd have to check with the city attorney's office. It seems like some years ago, we had a resolution that said salaries were tied to state increases. However, previously, the council was able to bring raises to themselves in the past. But I think that there was a resolution that was passed saying that it was tied to the county commissioners, you think? Well, yes and no. It's just a comment. Thank you.
Does anybody know? We do not set our own salaries. Is there anybody in the room who knows how that works? Because as I recall, we were tied, we got a slight boost because of the county commissioners got a boost and we line perhaps by state law with their salaries. Like, how does that work? No, not this year.
Madam Chair, councilors, that was not a change to salaries. That was a change to all city employees' PIRA rates, retiree health care rates, and health insurance rates for FY20.
What's in the budget is, but how counselor salaries get set. I think it's a point of information for the public. We do not set those. Those are set, I think, by state law to line up with whom?
Madam Chair, I would probably have to refer that question to City Attorney McSherry.
Okay.
As I don't know all the ins and outs.
Yeah, maybe we should, if Director Oster and Mr. Hopkins, if you would just get us the information about how counselor salaries are set.
Sure.
And I recognize that the small increase in this budget is around benefits. It's not giving the counselors any kind of increase in salary.
Madam Chair, I will send an email right now to City Attorney McSherry and ask her to respond to all the counselors.
Great, because I think we should just let the public know how that works. And clearly, we don't know how it works either. All we know is we're not getting a raise. Okay, for our part-time positions, I think we're gonna, if there are no more questions, we're gonna move on. Okay, so Mayor's office is our next budget. And then we're gonna go, after that, we do the risk and safety budget. And then we will do a preliminary approval of the general services, general government budget as a whole, which captures all of these budgets that we've heard today, except for the municipal court, which we heard a few days ago.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The biggest difference for the mayor's fiscal year 24 budget is that we are moving the community engagement, the neighborhood engagement coordinator into our department, into the mayor's department. That's the biggest increase. The other budget is for, we have money for supplies, printing, publication, and dues and expenses.
Questions from the committee? Councilor Rivera. Councilwoman Cassidy.
I will take it. I do want to discuss the neighborhood engagement specialist role. I know that when that role was previously filled, and I had a couple conversations with people about what precisely that role is supposed to fill. And there was some confusion around whether to go to that individual, go to the community engagement department. So I think some clarity about what this role actually is going to do and how it's different from the other positions that are within the overall government. And let's start there.
Welcome, Mayor.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
I don't think you need to introduce yourself.
Do you want me to go sit there? I can.
No, you can stay there.
I'm happy to.
Executive privilege.
Yeah, just convenience at the moment. Nice to see everybody. I think if I understood the question is we have community engagement as a office and a department. We have a role here, a coordinator, neighborhood engagement. How do they differ? I think to some extent, it's a little bit like what John was describing with the communications role, that the broad outreach and engagement is still where it belongs, which is in the community engagement and constituent services area. This is a role that done correctly doesn't conflict with the broad outreach efforts and support efforts that community engagement and constituent services provide. It's rather, as John was describing with communications, playing more offense, getting out into the community, being a listening post, participating in scheduling meetings and activities that connect with our neighborhoods very broadly, and track to the overarching initiatives that we're trying to advance. So I will take one very simple example that obviously the position isn't filled right now. So this is somewhat hypothetical, but I'm very energized about paying additional attention, for example, to Hopewell Man as an entity, as a neighborhood that could either benefit from or be severely adversely affected by the work we're going to do at Midtown. I would like to see an individual in this role helping to advance our engagement in that neighborhood, to really be a model effort to prevent displacement from happening in that particular part of town, and having a focused agenda around the way their time and energy is utilized to deliver targeted results in a specific geographic area. So I think it is a little bit comparable. I'll go back to where I started. It's a little bit comparable to the distinction John was making around communications, where we spend a lot of time with our community response group, Christine's team, in trying to do our best to respond to what people are telling us they need.
I don't think we do enough or as good a job being on our toes, going out and participating in neighborhood activities and community activities to try to, if you will, play more offense rather than just be responsive.
Thank you for that, Mayor. And in terms of this position and their interactions with counselors, because of course, as they're going out into the community, they're inevitably touching one of our districts.
Sure.
And I'm not sure if this is a question or more of a comment, but I definitely would want this individual that when they are going out into our districts, that the counselors of that district are informed and included. I know it can be, generally I saw that happening, but every once in a while there'd be some event in my district that I wasn't aware of. And that was frustrating. So
I shared that frustration.
Thank you.
Because I wasn't informed either. No, I think to the extent that we've had, only one example so far of somebody playing this role, I think that was one of the strengths, was that for the most part, Danny had an open door policy. People could stop in and just be able to converse about things on council members' minds and activities or upcoming events or opportunities to participate. And I think that is a very important adjunct to this role. It is a part of the ways in which as you said, our slightly hybrid government has to be collaborative. It's not designed to be an exclusive relationship. It should have much more ability to do outreach and bring information back in that everybody can use.
Yeah. And I would say that when this role was filled in whatever form it was, I did see an improvement in being aware of what was happening in my district. So I want to make sure that's continued. Wow. That was
And
really
that's,
loud
I think
thunder.
there's agreement from
Apparently, right. But also, when we are working on trying to coordinate neighborhood meetings, I am usually having to rely on the staff of the department that is the topic. So I have, one that I'm trying to work on with some issues with public safety. And so, I'm trying to work with Kira, but I understand Kira has a lot on her plate. Or when I've had meetings around parks and Melissa is wonderful and generous and her staff is great. Staff steps up to the plate, but I also know they're really busy. And I'm hoping that this position might be able to assist us in those scenarios as well. Is that something that is?
It's, this is where we are constantly getting into a tangle, I think. I don't think we got it sorted out. I know that Christine often finds out about an event that is being handled from a department head and nobody in her shop knew about it until the next day. And so trying to figure out the internal lines of communication and who does what and when is still very much a work in progress, I think. And again, if I could design it from a whiteboard point of view, like what's a perfect system with enough staff and so on, I think the clearinghouse would be through the community engagement shop, because they do have, as you all have already talked about with John, they've got the communications, the social media contacts, they've got the day-to-day keeping of the machine running when it comes to that kind of communication organization. They do our major events, right? I mean, the reason that the Easter egg hunt was such a well-oiled machine was that team knows how to put on an event. And I think we sometimes still get crosswise when I'm thinking in specific of an event that I accidentally stumbled into at the GCCC. I hadn't been told about it. Christine hadn't been told about it, but the Parks team was trying their best to respond to community interest. And so they put on an event that none of the rest of us, probably you either, knew about. And we're still sorting this stuff out as to, is there a central clearinghouse that can handle the demands? They certainly have the expertise. Whether that works to be the place that every single community event goes through, is there a way to structure it more effectively? a more formal way to, like we've started doing recently with requests for legislation. Is there a request for an event or a program that could be a clearing system that would run through community engagement? That would be my first choice personally, just thinking out loud. In terms of this individual, whoever it turns out to be, I think they become an ancillary part of that, because one of the things that we did get into in the prior way the role was filled was it added a little more confusion sometimes and not as smooth an operational delineation of who does what. And that's the last thing we need, is more people not knowing who told who they were going to do a certain task. And I don't think there's any intention to be confusing. I just think it's partly a government structure thing. I think it's also, if we ever, this is a pet hobby horse of mine, if we were ever all located in the same building, so people could easily see each other and talk to each other and coordinate with each other, rather than having it either be by email or text or a phone call. If you just see each other constantly, there's a lot less ambiguity in how things get structured. So long-winded way of saying, I think it's a work in progress. I don't think this individual is the absolute solution, but could be an augmenting part of making it possible for events in the neighborhoods to be better programmed.
Thank you. And I think that's a really good preamble for a conversation that we will be having tomorrow about the council liaison position that has been unfilled for the next 2 years. So fun preview. And with that, I yield the floor.
Councilor Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Neighborhood Engagement Coordinator, the previous one, I saw start off as a Neighborhood Engagement Coordinator and then get pulled into many different directions, including at one point helping out at the airport.
Yeah,
which I appreciated, being the chair of the Airport Advisory Committee, but
yeah.
How do we ensure, and I guess that's up to you and the rest of the staff, that this person is not being utilized for special projects?
Yeah, great question. And you're absolutely right about how what went from a fairly well-defined central task then turned into a Swiss Army knife kind of a position and a utility infielder. And you got to, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do, because otherwise the airport probably would have been in a lot of trouble, and Danny filled in admirably under emergency circumstances. But that's not what any of us would like to see in terms of how our operation as a city government works. We'd much rather have roles filled by the people who were hired to fill them, and the people who are asked to do a specific task get to focus on that and continue to do it. My hope is that however we fill this going forward, that's much more the case, that it becomes a really well-defined and consistent operating function.
So there's no intention on rewriting the job description or changing the title of the position once it gets.
I'm open to anybody's suggestion. I thought, in terms of trying to move ahead without too much interruption, it's been a vacancy for a while now, that if we kept the title and just moved forward, we would be getting the right kinds of applicants.
All right. And then just one final question. There's I think 3 people that are under your purview for hiring, firing, etc. Are those 3 individuals, the city attorney, city clerk, and city manager, all getting the 1% increase as well?
No, that's not for 2 of them, for both the city clerk and the city attorney. I provided larger than 1% increases in this budget. And I'd be happy to, if you'd like me to, I can describe my thinking about that.
if you can provide the percentage of increase and then do you have it here?
Madam Chair and Councilor Rivera, I can provide the increase for the city clerk. The proposed increase is 3.5%. And for the city attorney, the proposed increase is 5.5%.
And I'd be happy to, I mean, if you want to have a little dialogue about it, there, a good deal of thought goes into these decisions. And I'm, please, if you'd like me to give you a little backstory, I'd be happy to do that.
Sure, just why the 3.5 and why the.
Yeah. So let me start with the city attorney. And I don't know if you can queue up where the overall, each of these is different in terms of the managerial philosophy of pay. And they're both situational and, in my opinion, constitute good practice for managing pay. In the case of the city attorney, as you may remember, when Aaron came on, as was then the practice, much more so than now, the standard thing to do was to accept a contract rather than be under a non-contractual relationship. That meant for the first 4 years of her tenure as city attorney, she got no pay increase. She was locked into the agreement in that contract. When the contract expired, she let go of the security that a contract provides. And at that point last year, I gave her or I recommended, and you all agreed to, a salary increase that was larger than other senior managers, because at that point she was far below the pay rate of people with less experience, less responsibility, and less carrying less of a burden on behalf of the city. And she was significantly out of sync with other senior managers. If you remember last year, we were in a very good financial position, so everybody got an 8% raise. That meant that even though I gave her a higher increase than had been the past practice for people in general, other people kept going up faster than she did. And so in this budget, I tried to continue to get her back up to a pay rate that I thought was commensurate with her stature in the city government and her relationship with other senior managers. In the case of both her and the city clerk, I'm very concerned about senior women in our government being paid much less than senior men in our government. If you look at our, can I just borrow your laptops? So there are a lot of people who, are men and they've got great responsibility and they deserve to be compensated appropriately. But a city attorney is a really significant role, and a female city attorney is something that I think we should pay in a way that meets her responsibilities. If you look at our where her current stature is in our overall placement, for example, the community development director, who I have a great deal of respect for, makes more than the city attorney. The IT director makes more than the city attorney. So I think pay equity is a serious issue for senior women in our government. And as I said, she'd been effectively frozen for the first 4 years of her employment here. So this pay increase would bring her, I think, into a more appropriate relationship with other people of significant workloads and responsibility. The city clerk / community engagement community person, the community engagement person. You all remember there was a similar, I thought, unfortunate highlighting of her pay when she took that job in the first place. And as a consequence, I think she took a step back and said, I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing this because I want to prove that I can make a big difference in city government. And I salute you, Councilor Rivera, for at a community meeting not too long ago, giving her that accolade, because she has delivered on that promise of trying to create that new front door for city government. And for you to say that out loud and give her that recognition is a really super thing, because I think you said then, and I think we all know that she is, if not the hardest working senior member in a department, she's certainly up there high on the list, with going to all of the events and organizing the events and bringing CRMs to the community, on and on and on. At that, I think she was still, again, as a senior female leader, underpaid relative to both the workload and her colleagues. And some of that, I think, was a historical inequity that dated back to her first terms of employment, where she did take a step back in order to avoid or reduce controversy at that time. So I think in both of these cases, it's a pay equity issue. It's a acknowledgement of responsibility, workload, where they stand in the overall ranking of significant managers carrying a significant workload. And it's not, I don't believe, egregiously out of step with what we're doing in general. It's a little bit more of a bump, but it's not, we're not talking about a 10% pay increase or something that really is designed to call attention to or single people out in an egregious fashion.
So the city attorney is the 10th highest paid person in the city, and the city clerk is the 16th highest. Where do you know where this will bump them up in the?
That's a great question. Emily, can you do a quick math?
Maybe while she's doing that, I can ask you my last question, and that's we're making everyone else in the city wait for the class and comp study to come out to adjust salaries. Why not wait for that, just like everyone else?
Well, we're doing pay increases in the budget for everybody, 3%, as you pointed out. So you're absolutely spot on that with the budget, we're setting pay for people who are getting salary increases. And so it just seems to me that's the time to increase these folks' salary. Plus, we do know what, if you remember the exercise we went through with Christine last time, we looked at what community engagement / city clerks are paid around our region, other cities. She still comes in relatively below those other individuals. So I think it's more appropriate to fit this into the budget right now, because there's not a classification of city clerks. There's not 10 others of them or 10 other city attorneys. This is the one individual in that role. And we want to treat them fairly, and we don't want to lose them. We don't want them to feel unappreciated and go take their talent somewhere else.
So Director Salazar said they were going to address the female pay equities.
Yeah, absolutely. In general, that will be part of the study, but these are singular positions. There's not a classification of pick a horizontal category that these folks line up against. It's a one person, one job, as opposed to a cross-cutting category that we're trying to see that men and women who are filling those jobs are treated equally. I think it's not exactly a comparable, but I do think we need to acknowledge hard work, great responsibility, and pay equity for high-ranking female executives or high-ranking managers. Then you're right about where they stand right now, Counselor. And they're really not, if you just looked at it objectively without putting names against it, but just gender and responsibility, I think you would say objectively, there's some corrective measure to be taken here in a incremental fashion.
Hope we do the same for all our city staff once the time comes, even if it's higher than the 1.2 that we've budgeted.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. If you remember when I became mayor, there were a couple of interesting pay phenomena that I was handed as a brand new mayor. One was a $400,000 unallocated budget item from the previous administration that was supposed to go initially, as described in the at the time, for pay for performance, and nobody wanted that. And so we negotiated with the AFSCME leadership at the time. The council was involved in it, and we agreed to a completely different model to allocate that, including giving AFSCME the right to allocate it based on the need, those who were the lowest paid getting the highest percentage of that 400,000. And then the second thing we did that had never been done before was to actually fund the findings of the class and comp study. It was what it was. You probably remember better than I do. You're the memory of the, a lot of the memory of past practices. I think there were 2 or 3 previous class and comp studies that were done and shelved and never funded. And I made the commitment, and we kept the commitment, that we would put $1.5 million into funding whatever that study said. And we did do that. The 1.2, if it's insufficient, we'll try to find the money to get it done right. But there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that, and Councilwoman Villarreal has been the voice on this for some time. You can't do class and comp and not do pay equity at the same time. It just doesn't make sense.
Toaster, did you have that?
Yes, Madam Chair and Councilor Rivera, Mr. Mayor. So in the case of the city clerk, she will jump one spot up and be the 16th highest paid city employee. I think the reason that you and I have different numbers is because I have the municipal court judge included on my list. So you may not have that position on your list. So the city clerk will be going from 17th currently to 16th. And then in the case of the city attorney, it will be from 11th to 7th. And just looking at it here, I second what the mayor said. I think there's a clear pay equity issue, and I think we're chipping away at it. I don't know that these increases fully address the issue, but looking at the gender breakdown and the responsibilities, and in the case of the city attorney, the licensure requirements for that position, my perspective looking at it from, the finance director seat is that these are appropriate and necessary increases to address obvious pay equity issues and achieve take a step towards appropriate placement.
Yeah, I'm just bringing it up because everyone else is getting 1%. So
No, I think we need to talk about it, because otherwise it looks like we're somehow hiding the subject. It's when you think about, and this is something I will discuss with, anybody who wants to talk about it. I think many of the advances that we've been able to make in city government are directly related to the fact that we've been recruiting, retaining, developing outstanding managers and rippling that throughout the government to bring it into conformance with what the private sector as well as other governments are able to pay people. And it's not a popular subject. I think the general public conception is that the city government is the managers are overpaid and underworked, and we all know that's just not true. That whether it's a crisis involving the worst forest fire in our history, having management and leadership at the fire department is huge. Having leadership in the land use department as we confront redoing our overall general plan is enormously significant. These are really hard jobs, and people work at them. They're not working 40-hour work weeks. They're working long nights. And so we last year were able to do an 8% pay increase for everybody. This year, most of our managers said they would, that actually was brought up by the managers at a senior staff meeting. What if we as senior managers took a 1% increase and were able to use the incremental difference to boost the work pay for everybody? 3%, that came from our managers. In these two cases, I think they're slightly different cases. They're folks who have not been, they didn't come into the pay range that I believe as senior leaders they should have been at the get-go. So there's a little incremental bump to be more fair in these two cases.
No, I'm past my time. I have one more, but I'm willing to come back.
Mostly because I talked too long. It's not your.
I think that's fine. I do think we do have one more budget. It is 3:00 and I think we're going to have questions for this emergency management folks who've been patiently waiting in the back. So just with them in mind, go ahead and let's just keep it moving.
Yeah, just 81,000 in dues expenses. So really, what kind of places do you belong to? What kind of groups?
I would tell you, but then I'd probably have to kill you, Counselor. No, this is our things like the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and does this include the Municipal League or not? I'm not quite sure. No, that's a separate line item. This is stuff that historically the city has belonged to in order to get standing in outside organizations. It's not me personally. You know that. This is simply our way of being party to outside activities.
Get a list of those.
Yeah.
Whatever they are.
Yeah. I don't think you'll find the Bohemian Club on that list.
I'm not even going to ask what that is. Maybe that's naive.
That's all I had. Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Other questions? All right. I'm going to hold you to
50 minutes. Just kidding. It's gonna be quick. My colleagues asked similar questions that I had, and I think I just want to maybe more comments than anything. Well, first off, in terms of the positions that got larger increases and explaining it, I think is helpful for people to hear. I think the part that is hard for some of us, and I'll speak for myself, for me, is not seeing it in the budget book that we've seen in the past. So in a way, it doesn't feel transparent because it's not explicitly stated for us. And I think it should be. It should be stated that this is different than everybody else, that these two positions are not going to be getting the 1%, that they'll be getting something higher. And even the explanation would be helpful. I think it's just when you don't see it and then you have to find out through other means, that doesn't feel good. We have to hear, from other folks telling us, oh, well, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel equitable. And so the optics don't look good when it's not in here. So I'm just saying when these things occur, it's helpful to have it in the budget book. There may be people that disagree with it, but at least it's there and showing us that this is happening so that it feels more and looks more transparent to everybody, not just us, but the staff and the city. I think it's just helpful to know that this is happening and there's justifications for it, and that's fine, and explanations. So I think that's more of a statement, really, I think that's important. And when I calculate it, I do have the whole list of all directors and deputy directors, and the bump will give city attorney the 6th highest paying director position, and then the city clerk I calculated 14th highest. So I think just so
Madam
we know.
Chair, Councilor Villarreal, the list that was sent to you this afternoon doesn't include the 1%. So the
Right.
calculation that I did, and
So there's an additional 1%.
no, everyone else will receive the 1%.
Right. Okay.
So that affects where
Everybody
these
else.
raises, right?
Thank you for
So-
that clarity. Okay.
Yeah. And Madam Chair, just briefly, as far as the budget book, that was my decision to not call out certain individual salaries in the budget book. And, I'd certainly be happy to discuss that further. There was no intention to try to hide anything. I guess from my perspective, I see those salaries as a management decision, and I didn't feel the need from a finance perspective to highlight individual employee salaries in the budget document. So I'm certainly happy to discuss that further, but I wanted to just clarify that that was my decision and give a little bit of background on why I made that call.
Yeah, I think it's not singling out individuals, but it becomes that because when we all just read across the board, oh, everybody's getting a 1% that's above 100,000, it's not exactly accurate. So I think it would just be helpful to know that because it does affect the budget. It does bump it up. It does show an increase, but we don't know where exactly that increase lies because we don't see the breakdown of every single bump for staff. I just think it's for transparency, it helps. And there's a way to message it so that it, doesn't look, well, I think either way, people will feel a certain way, but here we are. I think, pay equity is important. I also think about the other positions that have 600 employees under them or 300. And then you see other departments that have 18 or 5. So yeah, it's hard to figure that out. And also part of it's historical, like what the position paid before. And so there's a lot of factors that play in, but I think it just doesn't help as a transparency for staff and other staff members across the city to see that and then, or not even see it. They don't see it. They don't know about it. And then we find out about it here and other mechanisms. I'll stop there. I'm just saying it just doesn't feel good. To my core, it doesn't feel good, but I understand the reasoning. It was helpful to have that. And so I'll move on to the other position that I've always been excited about. The neighborhood engagement coordinator was something we talked about way back. I think community members were excited about it. They saw it as a potential to have a intermediary, to have access to the city. And I feel like it's morphing again because I really did see it as being a role and being placed in the community engagement. It always made sense to me that way. And then the way it's shifted, and it did get a name change, maybe it had the engagement coordinator / I think it said senior advisor when we had that position. So the way it looks to me, it was a shell position in community engagement always. It never really served under that position and it served as a senior advisor. So I think we should just say it what it is. It's a senior advisor position. It has a neighborhood element to it, but it's not what we all envisioned when we first created this position. It was really to have community access. And so I don't see it being that way. So I'm just stating the reality. That's what it is. It's a senior advisor to the mayor. And it will have a community engagement component. And I do agree with my colleagues. It definitely needs to intersect with what's happening in the district because the last position never involved me in anything related to my district. And it was frustrating being like, oh, there's something happening. It's related to District 1. I wish I would have known about that. Or there were pieces that we were trying to work on District 1 and then they never got resolved because they were just there was a lot of things. I don't know. I just think that there's a good potential to connect us and connect our work and connect what you're trying to achieve, Mayor. And I just think there's a better way to handle it than the last position. So we should just call it what it is. It's probably going to change its name. We should all expect that. It's not a neighborhood engagement coordinator position. And so I look forward to whoever fulfills that role to be engaged and have a good communication skill to connect with us. And I think that's Those are all the questions I have now. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee? Councilwoman Cass.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I said I'd be speedy. I want to state my agreement with Councilman Villarreal that I felt that not having this listed, I understand that especially these positions, it's just individuals, and so that becomes a little bit harder, but we're a public entity, and that's what we do. I mean, our salaries are all listed on the websites with our names. So I would have preferred, I understand the reasoning why not to, but I didn't find it quite as transparent as I would like to see. And there's just one piece that I want to follow up, because I know it is tough and it starts to feel personal, but you're right. If we de-identify who this is and just look at it as positions and how things are shifting, or maybe I'm not de-identifying it, but both of these individuals are incredible assets to the city. They're absolutely incredible assets to the city. And yet we see what happens when we don't have the people below management, when we don't have enough of them. We also have a lot of problems with our city kind of not functioning. When we don't have enough lifeguards, when we don't have enough planners, when we don't have enough librarians, we're not able to provide the city services. And so while they both work very hard, extremely hard, and they work long hours, I think that it's a larger conversation about both not missing the hard work that is done every day because people just aren't as visible. I know that there's staff that, I still get emails from them at 11 o'clock at night, and then I usually email them back and say, please, why are you emailing me at 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday? Why am I emailing you at 11 o'clock at night on Saturday is another good question. But I want to make sure that, that's something that we all always keep at the forefront, that there is a lot of staff that are working just incredibly hard and incredibly long hours. And I do think that Councilman Villarreal again brings up this question, and maybe this is part of the class and comp, is I've always there's always been this question, especially when we start to get into these director positions where they are singular, is how do we decide this ranking? How do we spread, is it responsibility? Is it, it should be all these things: experience, education, number of direct reports. And I think that that's a larger conversation to have with HR, and maybe I'd hope to be having that conversation with class and comp. So that would be really helpful in terms of, as we continue to have these discussions, especially with these individual positions that do have more visibility. And so sometimes it can feel a little bit of me sitting here and saying, well, what is the reason why we're hiring this person at this salary, and understanding that. So I will stop there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anybody else? Okay, we're cutting in on emergency services, but go ahead.
This is quick.
This is
What was the
important.
salary for neighborhood engagement coordinator? Just the salary, not the benefits.
Madam Chair and Councillor Villarreal, let's see. On page 78 of your budget book, there's an increase to the mayor's budget that's primarily related to the neighborhood engagement coordinator. And I will note that that includes benefits as well. And it also includes other things. So that is listed on page 78 of your budget book, but just do be aware that number includes other things and also includes salaries and all benefits for that position.
I just want the salary part.
Madam Chair,
Benefits bring it up pretty high, which is great. I'm just curious what the amount was.
Councilor Vidal, I think that it's a salary range 15, which ranges from $24.94 an hour up to 37.40 cents an hour.
Do you have something to add to that?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, I was just going to mention that the current budgeted salary for that position is $81,000 per year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and to answer the question earlier about how counselors' salaries are set, I will direct everyone to our ordinances at 2-1.2, which is titled Compensation of Mayor and City Councilors. Focus in on the councilors. According to our ordinances, the councilors shall receive compensation for their services to the city in an amount equal to the maximum amount authorized by the legislature to be paid county commissioners in Class A counties as provided in Section 4-44-4 NMSA 1978, and as may be amended thereafter from time to time. And then let's see, going back, so that state statute 4-44-4 for Class A county salaries. The current law says the annual salaries of elected officials of the Class A county shall not exceed. And so for county commissioners, their salary shall not exceed $39,106 each. So our salaries by ordinance, by local ordinance, by Santa Fe ordinance are tied to the state statute, which sets the salaries for county commissioners. Apparently, there were some amendments tried to amend that state statute this last session, but none of them passed. So that is the salary for Class A counties, county commissioners. And since we as a city follow that level, that is, there's no change for city councilors. You were whispering something at me? No, I don't think they got a raise and then it was little and we aligned with them and we got a little bump a couple of years ago, I think, but as I recall, but I don't know I can't remember what year it was, but I think we became aware of how this worked. And so anyway, all right, we are needing to move on. So I am going to move us on now to, sorry, let me find my agenda. We have the Risk Management and Safety Division. Thank you for, sorry, I don't know where my voice is going. Thank you for your patience. Sorry it's been so long in getting to you, but we very much look forward to meeting you all and hearing about your budgets. And I will ask again, just remind you, please speak into the mic because otherwise you can't be heard on the various streaming channels that we have. And then also, if you would introduce yourself, your name and your position so that people can begin to be familiar with what you do for the city. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Again, I am the Deputy City Manager, Leila Archuleta Maestas, and
good afternoon. My name is Miguel Vigil, and I am the interim Health and Safety Compliance Officer.
Members of the council, my name is Melanie Bopato, and I'm the risk analyst for the Risk and Safety Division.
with us, we have Caitlin Naranjo, who's our admin assistant, and Joaquin Zamora, who's our workers' comp. So I know that there's been a lot of questions throughout budget hearing about risk and safety, why we moved it out of the departments they're in, which was finance and emergency management, and why we put them into general government and why we combined them. So first, to talk about why we combined them, risk and safety is they work critically together. So not only do they work together to reactively, but also to proactively prevent safety issues and claims. So if claims have come across their desk or possible claims, then Miguel can come in and he can look at ways we can prevent it from happening in the future or not even happening at all. So that's why we thought that putting them back together, as you mentioned, Councilor Villarreal, that they were at one point together, we thought that it would be in the best interest. And this is best practices in a lot of different municipalities. So we wanted to just put those back together. The second question, why we moved it under general government. We had some personnel changes and we thought it was a good time to look at restructuring the department. this department is both internal and external facing. And so when it's internally facing, it touches a lot of different departments. For us, we wanted to find the most neutral ground for them to be in. And for that, we thought that the city manager's office would do that. We want to make sure that there is not conflict of interest when it comes to claims and safety issues. And we can really just get down to the work and make sure that what needs to be done is done. So I want to just start off with that. And I'll pass it over to Miguel.
So currently we have in the risk and safety office, or what is referenced to in a lot of our documentation, is that it's a risk and safety division, right? So we have the risk management and the safety in there as well. So our primary function is to be able to assist the city in city departments, divisions, personnel in being able to address safe work practices in an effort to reduce the severity, frequency, and number of claims that we actually sustain. And those claims could either be from general liability or they could be through workers' comp because we have employees that were injured. So that's what our real focus is. So you have the mission statement for the risk is up on the board there. Basically what I just said, that includes everything from filing workers' compensation claims to making sure that we're compliant with OSHA as far as reporting of those different injuries that may have occurred throughout the year. Any questions on that?
Next slide. This year, I do want to just point out that we did have an increase. Actually, Melanie, do you want to cover this part? Yeah.
You have an increased volume of claims coming in.
I need you to speak right into the mic. Sorry, otherwise they can't hear you out in Never Never Land.
We did have a higher volume of claims than we've usually had turned in on general liability and work comp side, which needed to increase our budget to fulfill those commitments of the claims that are coming in.
And so that's the most increase in our budget. I don't think we have anything else in there that's other than those cost increase.
And then for fleet and vehicle, we do have an internal line item where we try to fix our vehicles internally so we don't have so many docs onto our insurance. And so for that, just with the inflation of the world, parts are costing more and so forth. So we had a slight increase for that reason to fix our internal vehicles and property damage.
I also just wanted to talk about some of the work that this office does. So this office does hold the new employee safety orientation, which if you have not done it, I recommend you drop in some time. You really helpful. Miguel has so much information and knowledge on the topic. And so people walk away with so much information. And he's recently also implemented a supervisor training, which looks at, it takes what the new employees learn and increases it. So not only do the directors know what their employees are learning, but also to the next level on what they should be as supervising, implementing within their offices. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that. No. Yeah, so we also do job hazard assessments, and they also do a lot of after action. So after we have an incident, Miguel or Melanie or Joaquin will come to my office and we'll sit down and we'll look at what happened and what they can do to remedy the situation. So they are really important in making sure that we keep our office in in the know. And then also so that we can prevent it from happening and talk to our directors about what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. We have a lot in the city that we're doing day-to-day, but making sure that safety is a priority is really important, and making sure that we don't cut corners and so that we can get things done. We want to avoid that as much as possible. So I don't know if either of you have anything to. If not, we'll stand for questions.
Questions from the committee? Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm just happy to hear staff is coming together again, and I'm curious how you all feel, but I just remember when that split happened, didn't make sense to some of us, and then I think staff felt the same way. So I don't know if anyone has anything to share about the new structure and how you see maybe the some positive aspects of a new structure and negative, maybe there's negative aspects too, but just maybe some insight to that.
Well, typically I don't like to use good or bad or negative or positive. I like to use what can we sustain and what can we improve. So as far as the personnel that we have is that there's 4 of us in the city that has about 1,300 employees and about 1,200 pieces of equipment. So how do we impact making the city safer tomorrow than it is today and so on? So I'd say that we need more staff. At one time, the city of Santa Fe had the risk and safety division had about 8 employees. So and when that split happened, we were down to 3, and then we were down to 2. And fortunately, Caitlin came aboard with us on October, and Joaquin started in December. So since then, we have really been aggressive in training. And I'm sure that you guys have seen some of the emails that go out that, we're offering the first aid training, or that we have other types of training available, So we try to continue that up tempo, but we do definitely have a lot of work to do. And we need to make sure that we're engaging the supervisors, because we're not going to fix anything if the supervisors aren't on board.
Yep, good point. Thank you for the other perspective, sustain and what we can improve. That's a good way to describe it. And as for the positions, in our booklet, it says 6 are filled.
So
and one's vacant.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, we have 4 positions. We have 2 available right now, which should be posting. Just posted. Woohoo.
Actually, the risk management just posted
Okay, so we have
10
those.
minutes ago.
So they are posted. So if anybody out there wants to apply, let us know. So we will be expanding our capacity, and then we won't have any more vacancies in the
So
position.
that's 4, and then there's 2 vacancies, and then
I think that should be all.
okay, so now there'll be 6 versus 8. And have we thought about those other positions? Where did they go when it was split? The 2 that you're talking about, I don't know what positions they were.
So the way I understand it is that this happened in about 2018, 2017, 2018. And through retirements, those positions just were not filled. And then, of course, COVID hit and everything was frozen, and then it was unfrozen. So at this point, we would have to go back and request the additional positions. Now, we were also told it's a flat budget, so we couldn't do that.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, I don't know where those positions went. It would take some pretty extensive research to figure out what happened to them.
Yeah, well, a lot of departments, frozen positions disappeared or went somewhere else, and it's hard to track them when that happens. And unfortunately, we don't get to see how that happens, and we see the results like, oh, that was a lot larger position, or there were more positions. So hopefully we can get back to that. I know it's been busy, and there's an external facing piece that you didn't talk too much about, but it's also, if there's something that happens as a result of city, like a situation like some of the flooding that we had with bursting pipes, et cetera, that was super busy for staff. And I know constituents would ask me and want to know who to contact. And that's been hard, because I am not sure the best route for us to be able to direct those calls and being able to make sure that people get evaluated appropriately. So is there a plan? Because I think there's more that's going to happen that way. And it's a hard job, because then you're having to assess our city's responsibility versus, public or the community member or the neighborhood or whatever. So I'm just curious, it sounds like Melanie's the only one doing that, or the external side, or?
Madam Chair, Counselor Villarreal, yes, I handle the risk management side of it. So the claims that are all coming in. I now have Joaquin, so I'm training him on the workers' comp side, but for general liability, it's currently me. Miguel's great. He helps. He's able to assess in the safety sides of it, even when it's general liability. We work really well together, but yes. When you get those calls, you're always welcome to forward it to me. I could give you my contact information and I like to get them helped as soon as possible.
Right,
'Cause
yeah.
it's unfortunate when they go through something like that.
Yeah, it's a lot. And then, so I guess I'm wondering, Leila, your role in this, because I see it as like proactively handling the situations, whether it's internal facing or external facing. So are you all thinking in your role, or is that how you see your role in this? I guess I'm not sure the
Yeah.
way it's structured, what your role is going to be as it relates to everybody else in the team.
So Counselor, Madam Chair, Counselor Villarreal, I don't necessarily work on the day-to-day operations. It would be the same as if any other department. So they do meet with me regularly. They bring things to my attention, as I mentioned before, but from day-to-day operations, I'm not involved. Unless I have to get involved, like there's a director that I need to meet with or something of that sort. I need to, but for the most part, I'm not involved in day-to-day. So it would be the same as me and HR, me and finance.
So I guess I'm just wondering, because some of these get complex. So does Ms. Lovato have to make all the decisions, or how do you get involved then, Leila? Because then if there's like ways to try to figure out the complexity, who does Ms. Lovato go to?
So with our general liability and our workers' comp, we're self-insured, as you guys are aware. So we have 2 TPAs who help us. So
TPA.
yeah, they're third-party administrators and they facilitate our claims after a certain level. So I get contacted, I get the facts, I work to establish jurisdiction, if it's a city, state, or county, and then I direct the claim from there. If it's a city, I offer them a form to complete. They file that form with our office. I get it entered into a database I have with our third-party administrator, and then an adjuster is assigned. And then I work hand in hand with that adjuster throughout the whole claim process. If they file suit, if it gets big enough that we need outside counsel handles our claims for general liability. So we work with them. We make sure they meet with the divisions. We do the whole operation with them from beginning to end. So I do have help in the capacity of adjusters are out, through our TPA. We do all the initial work for them and work through the process, attend mediations, litigation, so forth until the claim is solved. And then I also do the insurance program. So I work hand in hand once it becomes over our SIR, which is our insured retention. Then I work with them and put them on notice, and then we go from there from beginning to end. But it is a lot of work. I've been there for 18 years. So 4 of my years were in HR and the rest have been there. So with risk management. So I'm good at what I do. I'm happy to admit that. I love my job. But it does get overwhelming. Help is great. So it's not something easy to just jump into either, because it's a lot with the process. You have to have a lot of knowledge and awareness of what's going on. It's not just something you could train overnight, but we're happy that we're going to be getting staff in the future to be able to train and help with that.
Thanks for walking us through that and like what's involved with claims. It's important because we don't see that side. We just hear people complain. So, but I appreciate that and all the work you all do on a regular basis.
Become a part-time counselor for our constituents out there that need help. No, and constituents is now aware of what I do. So they've become my best friends in the past few months, and they're starting to shift people over to me when it's regarding a claim and they're not comfortable with.
You mean through constituent services? Oh, great. Good to know.
Madam Chair,
Sure.
Councilor,
Yes.
yeah, I just add to that is that the reason that we have a TPA is because they are unbiased. So if we get the claim, we just say we're not paying it, and then that's going to result in a lawsuit. Whereas if we have a TPA, they send an adjuster out there, look at the actual incident and what caused it, and determine whether or not we have any liability or not.
Definitely helps. And I knew about that. I just didn't know how the flow went. So it was really good to hear about that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee? thank you for your service. That's fantastic, and can tell that you really care about what you're doing and the people you're serving. So really appreciate it, and appreciate the whole division and stepping up into a leadership position, Miguel. That's I'm glad you're there. So thanks everybody for the work you're doing. Counselor Cassett, we're going to move on unless you have questions.
I do not have questions, but I do want to reiterate the thank you for the work that you're doing. It's again, some of that really important work that's really behind the scenes. And as you spelled out, it's a lot with a very small team. So really appreciate your work. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we have now heard the general government budgets, and I will entertain a motion.
You doing, Madam Chair, are you doing one at a time or the whole?
I was going to do them all together, but what's the pleasure of the committee? That's the way we've been doing them, is big chunks.
I'll move for a provisional approval of the general government, as well as risk management and safety budgets.
And just so you all know, risk management and safety is now under general government. So for everybody who may be watching or listening, the general government section of the budget covers the mayor's office, the city council's budget, the city manager's office, the city attorney's office, the municipal court, who we actually heard earlier. And I guess we didn't do a specific motion for them. So this motion would cover them today. And then the risk management and safety budget. Yes, Councilor Cassett.
I know that there's going to be some changes to this budget, so we'll have the opportunity to approve it on Thursday. So,
So what we're doing is preliminary approval, recognizing that there may be amendments on Thursday.
I understand. Yeah, that is what we're doing.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second? Okay, I have no motion. I have no second. That motion fails. Is there an alternate motion, or does the committee just want to stand in place?
I move to, what would I even say? Wait to vote until Thursday when I see the amendments.
Okay, I will just say that what we've done throughout this whole thing is preliminarily approve budgets, recognizing that there may be tweaks to budgets, all of them that we've preliminarily approved, or even this one today. But if the committee does not want to take action on this, even in a preliminary manner, that's where we'll leave it. I will, yes, Director Oster.
Madam Chair, I would just note for the committee's consideration that we do have an amendment that has been submitted by staff for one of the previous budgets that was given preliminary approval. So there is still an opportunity to amend after preliminary approval.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. So, and let's just talk about process a little bit. So, if you have amendments to this budget, you need to submit the request in through the Legislative Services Office, the way we do amendments for any other thing, because what we're approving is a resolution to adopt the budget. That was introduced at Finance a week ago, I think. And so that is what we are amending, is that resolution. So any amendments, according to our procedural rules, have to be written. They have to be submitted to Legislative Services so that they can be drafted. We have on our agenda time on Thursday to consider any amendments that are made. and vote as a committee to adopt them or not. And according to our procedural rules, any amendment that this committee adopts to the budget attaches to the budget, becomes part of the budget. After we've considered any amendments that have been made or have been offered, we will then take a vote on the overall resolution. So it'll basically be the Finance Committee's recommendation for the budget with any amendments that are adopted that will go forward to the full council, the full governing body for its final approval. And that date is scheduled for
Madam Chair and councilors, that is scheduled for May 10th.
May 10th. And we do know that we have to have the budget balanced and submitted to the state by, what's that date?
Madam Chair, there's a statutory deadline of June 1st for municipalities to submit their budgets to the State Department of Finance and Administration. And because there are 5 Wednesdays in the month of May, there's a week off. So if we don't get the approval on May 10th, we're probably going to need a special meeting because the next regular meeting isn't until May 31st, which doesn't allow enough time to get it finalized and submitted to the state by June 1st. So
right,
May 10th is when we're
May 10th. So that's the final approval by the governing body of the budget so that the staff can do the final work in prepping it for submission to the state by the statutory deadline. So just kind of a roadmap of how this is going to work. If you do have amendments, again, please make those requests through legislative services so that we can have them drafted for consideration at Thursday's meeting. And you should be, as I mentioned at the top of the meeting, there is an amendment being offered. It's the mayor's amendment. It's the capital budget. I am signing on to it as a member of the Finance Committee so that we can make that amendment, so we can have that budget considered here and make a recommendation to the whole governing body about that budget as well. So you should be that my understanding is that's being loaded to PrimeGov. We can also send it out to all of the governing body and I will work on that with Director Oster after the meeting. So questions from the committee on how we're moving forward and how this all works? Councilwoman Villarreal, you have a furrowed brow.
I'm trying to look on the PrimeGov for the addition to the capital allocation. That's the capital budget and it's not loaded.
Yeah, so
we send it via email. I didn't see that.
no, so it'll be loaded today. I just signed off on the final paperwork during the meeting, and my understanding is the city attorney's office is going to load it to PrimeGov. I asked them to do it today so that you all have the evening to look it over before tomorrow's budget hearing. I will also work with Director Oster after the meeting to get it emailed to you directly and all members of the governing body so that you have it that way as well.
And this is the capital. Maybe you can
Director Oster, can you describe what this
Sure,
budget
Madam
is?
Chair and Councilor Villarreal, this is a little bit different than the capital budget. We're calling this a capital allocation. There's funding in Fund 365, which is restricted for capital improvement projects. And so as part of, recommendation for one-time spending, we are including a request for approval for a capital allocation. And that is different than the process that's coordinated by Director Wheeler and Public Works that starts in the summer and goes into the fall, that results in our ICIP listing.
So this is not connected to ICIP?
No, Madam Chair and Councilor Villarreal, no, because this is state funded. ICIP is our state capital outlay request. This is using city capital money from Fund 365, which is a city fund that's dedicated to capital.
And what's the budget for Fund 365?
Madam Chair and Councilor Villarreal, the amount that we're proposing for this capital allocation is just under $13.4 million. It is included in the resolution that was introduced in Finance Committee at the regular meeting. on the 17th. What we're doing with this amendment is we're substituting in the summary page with more detail about the specific projects that we're proposing.
And the Fund 365 gets funded through.
Madam Chair
Fund?
and Councillor Villarreal, Fund 365 is a capital improvement fund that's restricted for capital outlay.
Thank you.
Councillor Rivera.
Director Oster, how does money get into that fund?
Madam Chair and Councillor Rivera, I'm going to turn to Andy Hopkins to explain that.
Well, he's coming up, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Never heard of or seen staff making amendments to a resolution, yet I heard that was gonna happen.
Madam Chair and Councillor Rivera, staff identified corrections that are needed to the budget. So we are drafting the proposed amendment, which is then being sponsored by the mayor and Councillor Romero Worth in the case of the capital.
And the reason I'm co-sponsoring is because amendments here have to be offered by a finance.
Right.
And they need to be, again, trying to do the work in committee of shaping this resolution to adopt the budget and fulfill our, we've been sitting here for almost 3 weeks, wanting to make sure that it's as close to its final shape as possible. So just trying to do that work here.
Madam Chair and Councillor Rivera, for clarification, I just want to share that there are 2 staff amendments that I've been working on. One is the one we've been talking about here related to the capital, capital allocation, just providing the detail of what we would like authorization to utilize that $13.4 million on. And then the other one has to do with the wildland fire positions that we discussed during community health and safety, to add funding and authorize the creation of those 4 FTE that Chief Moyo would like to create. And so in that case, the mayor is a co-sponsor, and then we have you, Councillor Rivera and Councillor Cassett, as co-sponsors for that amendment as well.
I was added on that one too. Apparently, Chief called all of us.
Okay, Madam Chair and Councillor Villarreal, the more the merrier. I'm delighted to hear that there's support for that amendment. So
Yeah.
So
I think putting together this budget is a massive undertaking on the part of the finance department and the key staff that you've been hearing from over the last few weeks. And so in one instance, I think, there was something that was needed to be done that didn't quite get done. So that's the reason for one amendment. And then the other just wasn't able to pull that allocation, that capital allocation completely together by the time the resolution was introduced. So we have given staff a little bit more time to pull that together, and that is now ready. And I want to make sure you have it today prior to our discussion tomorrow, so you can see exactly what's on it. And Mr. Hopkins, you are at the podium.
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, just in response to your question that Director Oster referred, just to give a little background. Every year during the budget process, we go through internally in our office and in conjunction with the city manager and the mayor, a fund balancing process where we see, okay, where are our funds in good shape? Where do they maybe need help in terms of a subsidy? Or, maybe we move some expenses around where that's possible. That's usually not possible. Assistant Director Oster and I, Assistant Director Lotero and I, during that process, discovered that there was a little bit of money available in capital funding that we could use for capital expenses and restricted funds, primarily Fund 365, which is dedicated to capital improvements. We also identified a few other funding sources that would allow for one-time capital expenses. The reason we've done this is because, as you know, it's been a while since we've been able to do a bond issue. Some of our grants we're having a little bit of trouble with, so the decision was made by us and Director Oster and the mayor and city manager to go out to departments and say, well, what are your critical capital needs that we could maybe spend a little bit of money on. And just for clarification, and we'll go over this a bit more tomorrow. This is a combination of funding in the aforementioned Fund 365, the Capital GRT Fund. There's also a bit of money being used from Economic Development Fund balance for the El Lucero project. There's a bit of money being used from General Fund balance, and a bit of money being used from Fund 216, which is the GRT fund balance. And these projects are being funded by a combination of fund balance and some small amount of unallocated money that is available in terms of revenue and excessive expenditures for the FY24 budget year, in the case of funds 216 and 365. So I hope that clears it up a little bit.
Right, and I think
I'm
we're
getting
going to talk more about it tomorrow when we have the list in front of us. So Councilor Rivera, you still have the floor.
Clear as mud, Andy, clear as mud. All right, so thank you. And I'm glad to hear that you can't move or don't typically move money around to cover expenses. I thought that was just reserved for us up here, but glad to hear that part of it. Ms. Oster, I think at the beginning you said we were putting 10.5 million, 10.6 million into the reserves. Is that just what's required from us, or is that in addition to the 10% that we require on ourselves?
Madam Chair and Councilor Rivera, so the state does require us to provide a reserve equal to 1/12 or roughly 1 month worth of expenditures. And the calculation of that $10.5 million is roughly equivalent to that state mandated reserve based on the current proposed budget.
Maybe it's not reserve. What's the fund that I'm thinking of that we hold 10% of? Or GRT, I believe.
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, we're actually talking about two different things. There is a minimum reserve requirement. The state requirement is 1/12 of the current year's budgeted expenditures, not including transfers in the general fund. But this $10.5 million net addition to cash balance or fund balance is you'll see that in the all funds summary of the budget book. It's in the front section. I can't remember what page it is, but you'll see at the bottom line, that's basically comparing the overall all funds expenditure budget versus the overall all funds revenue budget. When you compare those two, the budgeted revenue is $10.5 million higher than expenses. And that's again, across all funds. That's not just general fund, that's across all funds. In general fund, actually, it is balanced. There is no addition or subtraction from reserves in the general fund in this budget. But that's across a lot of that $10.5 million is in the form of utility funds that are actually, they tend to give us their operating budget now, and then later in the year, you'll be seeing bars for them to do like capital projects and things like that, that take up that additional cushion that they have in terms of revenue and excessive expenditures. I would also note that this capital amendment that we are bringing forward will pretty much negate that $10.5 million at the net level. That's essentially use of that $10.5 million. It's not all in the same funds, but at the net level, that will basically cause that to go away.
Other questions from the committee? Okay, so that's our plan, and we will convene tomorrow at what time, Director Oster? Noon?
1 p.m.
1 p.m.
Madam Chair, 1 p.m. tomorrow.
Okay, right, because we're gonna adjourn by 4 so that we have an hour break before the council meeting. So tomorrow's a long day. Thank you, everybody.